Hello, greetings. Engineer Bob here. Today we're going to return to the public servers. Let's take a look at a lunar start for today. It says it's hard mode. However, I think it's a bit easier just because we've got something that's already mobile. Let's go ahead and try the lunar start for today. Lunar start can be pretty easy, just because we are mobile. However, the lunar area is typically PvP, just because the low gravity and no atmosphere make it very accessible to everyone. And it's already maxed out. The ore detector is going to help us find some ore nodes without going completely crazy. If we zoom all the way out from our third person, we can kind of cheater mode look around, and I spy in that top center area some discolored ground. So we're gonna go off that way. There we go. Vehicle doesn't want to turn. May have given it too much power for the mass that we have at the moment, causing it to rear up. But on the moon, we can see that the ground is this light color, and the discolorations that we're looking for at the moment are going to be this more yellow color here. We'll hold space to stop a little sooner, and it is causing us to rear up. We will want to be careful with our gyro in that case. One of the things that does make the lunar surface more difficult is that we do require ice almost immediately, and that's because the little bit of supply that we have is limited. So while this might be a good location here, magnesium, nickel, silicon, it's not something to write home about. Currently on that hill in the distance, also top center, I see another discolored spot, so we can go there. Get all that air that we got there. And it is because we are going rather fast on the lunar surface. We'll slow it down a bit. This hillside offers us iron, nickel, and cobalt. This is actually an excellent location to start from because it has these critical resource of iron, which we'll need ample amounts of, and cobalt, which is a gatekeeping piece for us. We can enter the crater, and we can go a bit faster in our search. We just need to be careful about our hydrogen consumption, so once we get closer to it, slow down and cease movement. The drill doesn't seem to be detecting anything, even though this is our discoloration patch. Possible that the ore is just deeper than what the drill can detect. There we go. Gold and silver. This is amazing. So gold and silver, also excellent for starting, because this will allow us to get out and complete a jump drive, allowing us to get into space. So this is an excellent area. I just need a bit of ice. Alright, a little nostalgia there in the chat. It's one of the fun things about the public servers is that you never know who you'll be online with. Even though the public servers are pretty small, only 16 persons in a server, and everyone tends to be rather spaced out, it doesn't mean you can't not find someone. Oh, look here. Beautiful ice. We can actually retrieve a bit of this ice. Let's go ahead third person, and we can zoom way out again. And from here, we'll just kind of move around until we make this number from the ice distance as small as possible. And I'm just going to move up, down, left, and right until I can get this to drop down. If I overshoot it, just walk back the other way. That looks about decent here. I'm gonna look down and the double right click just so I can mass remove. And I'm going to just allow myself to fall into a bit of a pit here. Another thing that can make any kind of voxel removals like we're doing, drilling, mining on planetary or moon surfaces, is that these indentations and changes in the surface that we are making can actually be seen from a very long distance away. Like, you can be in space above a planet and know where a base is located just because they've disturbed the voxels in the area, which is very nice because that is nice. It's very nice because you can find an enemy just by looking where they've been drilling, and a lot of new players will drill in the immediate vicinity of their base, which makes it easier to find them if you chose to grief them. It's bad if you wanted to remain obscure, which most players want to do, so that they cannot be griefed. The way ore detection works in this game is that the ore detectors will just kind of pick up on a location on the ore patch. So it may not be the dead center. You may actually just be detecting the closest edge, or you may be detecting a far edge. So it's more of a guideline rather than, yes, this is actually the shortest path to where you're trying to get to. I will advance forward to it. And that's kind of what I was talking about earlier as far as the ore detectors go, is I'm clearly not directly under where I started anymore. Had to walk off to the side, and here's some ice. Even though I was pretty well over it, I did not get the directly above the ice. And if we remember where we parked our car, it was over by our first... It was over here by our first node that we popped. But your starter ships also have this nice little icon on them that says respawn pod. I'm going to go ahead and pop all of my materials in the back by using Alt middle mouse button. And something else I need to be doing is producing out of my survival kit. You have multiple production pieces on your vehicle. You can select production tab and then go to the survival kit. Survival kit will only turn stone into our base materials, iron, nickel, and silicon. So I'll be queuing up a couple thousand of these because I know there's iron, but this will not process it. And to expedite all of this, I want to do some upgrades to my vehicle here. So the first thing I should do is, there is no atmosphere in the moon, or on the moon rather. I will remove these atmospheric thrusters. I won't need them for now, but their parts could be very helpful, particularly these metal grids, which we will need shortly. Lights are always nice, so I'll keep those on for the moment, but I can afford to lose some of the steel plate. Especially if you haven't been on a server before and you're just working off of a brand new character who has none of the progression unlocked, you will want to scrape down some of this material on your vehicle here. So with that being said, let's kind of gloss over the tree real fast. Hitting G will get us to our blocks menu. We can see that I actually have all of the progression blocks, but if you are starting new, you may not. I will try to knock out most of this in an order that's achievable, and we usually start with the landing gear. If you have one of the drop pods, you have landing gear on your vehicle already. Just grind down one of those and then rebuild it real fast. We do not have landing gear because this is a rover. So what we can do is we'll make a block first. We weld that up, and I want that steel plate back, so it's gone. Next we can do is go to our, let's go over here. We're on a third tab now, and we can add a landing gear. Let's drop the landing gear. That's what it looks like unbuilt, and I already have the components from all of those atmospheric thrusters, so we'll just build this up. Once it passes that functional line, it'll become functional, rather, and ran out of energy there, so I needed to take a quick pause. Once we weld it up past that functional, you should see a little message on the screen that says that new blocks have been unlocked. Pop over to our G menu again, check out the progression. We scroll back down, we should have access to cockpits next from this landing gear, and since we actually have a cockpit on this vehicle, we can build that and it should unlock us thrusters and weapons. We can do that now. I have a cockpit here, and we can grind that guy down for progression. Just below that functional line is all you need, and then weld it back up. So if you did not have the progression already, now you should. Alright. Other things that we can do on here is we can get rid of some of these materials. And there's our gyro, which we really need, but I don't know if we could build that quite yet. I think we can build it after the cockpit. Let's go. Gyros. Yeah, gyros are in here with the weapons, so after we built that cockpit, we should have access to that gyroscope as well. Can be very helpful when trying to maneuver around. Let me squat down just a bit. You're trying to maneuver around with just the atmospheric thrusters. Here we see that parachute hatch. We really don't need it at all on this vehicle. So we can get rid of that guy and then pick up that parachute that's in there. I'm doing this so I can get access to these conveyor tubes and the conveyor network. The next thing I should have to unlock for that progression is a cargo container, I believe. H2O2 generators will give us tanks, and if we come over here, this is our H2O2 generator. And grind that down and weld it back up. And kind of get a sneak peek of where I'm aiming for in there. There is a cargo container, small one at least, that is in this vehicle. I'm just trying to get at it at the moment. Now we can weld it up, and we'll have a bit of cargo space. This should have also unlocked the rest of the conveyors for us. We'll go back to our progression. Building the cargo container, we will be able to access all of our cargo containers by building the one and all of the conveyor junctions. Let's go ahead and get some more energy and oxygen because I am low at the moment. This looks like a great location for us to start, and instead of hand mining everything, what I want to do is get my vehicle set up so that I can work a bit faster. I want to engineer solutions as opposed to hand mining everything. Power is going to be something that we want. We cannot use wind whatsoever on the moon because there is no atmosphere, so solar will be exclusively what we need. But mostly what I want right now is the tools that come from having built the cockpit, and we'll be using the drills. So the drill tool is collapsed under this grinder, which has grinders, welders, and drills on it, seen here. We can get just the drill, or we can grab the whole block of all of them. Sort through our menus, see what I already had on here, and I see I have drills being able to be built already. I'll just slap that on. Mostly I just need the drill for the moment. And make sure it's lined up. Our drill has one port on the back and 2 ports on the sides. So I want to make sure those 2 small ports are aligned and I can place it there. I know I have some of these on hand, and I'll probably need to build the rest of these components here. I'll get this welded up. It should stop me. I'll right click with that welder in hand to get components. Middle mouse button back here and withdraw those components because we had them from the atmospheric thrusters. Now I've got a drill and I've got a mobile rig here, and I should be able to get a lot more stone. If I start over here, I'll go ahead and put myself in a park. I want drill, toggle on off, and group tools. That way I can get a mass removal going at the same time. I hit that 8 and do a right click and kind of make a bigger divot for me to work with here. And I may want that just so I can like start a more level approach into an area. Now I'll turn my drill on. My cockpit should be connected to the drill, and we saw that when we were building it. And from the cockpit also to the H2O2 generator, because I have hydrogen and oxygen supply. And then also in the piping back there was the cockpit, the H2O2 connector, the H2O2 generator are connected to our survival kit, which means that our simple drilling here is actually putting everything that we want into our survival kit. If we hop over to its production, we see that it's hard at work starting to generate iron ingots, nickel, and silicon for us. And this is fantastic for us because we'll need these materials in order to make components, and from those components we can go and start building the rest of our stuff here. I know we'll need power, so we can tell it to start making solar cells for us. And I kind of want to place them now-ish while I have the sun. I just stop moving a second and look at the sun. I see it setting in front of me at the moment. So that's disheartening that I'm going to be losing the sun so immediately. But you usually start with a bit of daytime already. Probably been about a half hour since I started, so that's pretty reasonable. We'll scooch back, have a bit more control with our drill. Come off this way and plow forward a bit more. Our single drill isn't going to cut us enough space to move in, so we would need more drills in order to just drill straight in. I have a different plan for that, but I will continue working with what I have at the moment. I do need to do some expansion on this, but we do have a bit of a danger too, as our ship will disappear if we log out. And that is specifically log out, not are forced off the server by a server restart. Haven't worked on this guy in a while. This is a conveyor junction area, and they put the big one in. And this is actually what I want. I'll pull up that gyro. Get rid of some of these pieces. I want this one because we can put a hinge or a rotor or something to convert from small grid to large grid and place that directly over this big port. Since I know it's piped all the way through, I could say put a rotor here. Rotors should be unlocked after we build a battery, and we could build a battery after an assembler. So you would not be able to do this immediately. We'd have to build the assembler first, and that's so what I could do is queue up the parts for it and then build it, destroy it, build it again. Because what I really want is to have it attached to our ship for power and for passing materials through. And I need to queue up the components for our assembler. Using the middle mouse button on the various items in our menus here, we can add items to our build planner, and we can right click to remove them. I have the basic assembler in my build planner, so I'm going to come over here to the back of my production unit, which is my survival kit at the moment. And I'm going to try to tell it to build all of the components. So I'm going to shift middle mouse button, and it's going to start building everything that is listed in the build planner. And because we only had that assembler in there, it is going to try to build everything. Now, I will need more of the ingots to get me more base materials. I'm going to move this out because your assembler will work in the priority listed here. So by moving this down, it will not be the first priority. What I do need to do is get it more materials to work with. And something I can do with that too is tell it to build me a cargo container. Actually, we had our cargo container here, but the specific one I want is this medium cargo container. Medium cargo containers are only for the small grids. We can see this little icon here designates it for a small grid, whereas this cargo container here is only for a large grid, and this small cargo container can have a small grid or a large grid variant. But all we want was this medium one, and we'll also put that into production. Shift middle mouse button for that as well. Come back in, and we can see that here's the components for our assembler. I moved our ingot production to the bottom here, and then more components for this cargo container I just put in. I want to advance these just so that I can get the cargo container on here. And all I needed was the one plate, this interior plate, to start with, to allow me to place it. The survival kit has a large port on the back, and this medium cargo container has a large port going through it. We'll align those ports and select them. With that one plate, I know it starts with the interior plate because the bottom icon it has is the interior plate. That's what these blocks will start with. So now I can remove this from my build planner, right click by looking at this with the welder route, and then we'll re-add all the components minus that one interior plate. It says it's missing some components, a display, and those last few interior plates. That's fine because we're probably out of material. We can come back into our rover and then get a little bit more going. That should allow us to continue working. Still is awkward to drive in just because of the mass that we're putting through this rover. See, we only have the 2 wheels on it at the moment. But once we get these different pieces added on, that cargo container specifically, the weight's going to shift almost immediately. And that cargo container will allow us to get more out of our drilling so that the rover has a place to put all of this. And come back here and look at where we're at. Should have built those last few components for us, so we will try to withdraw and tap it in. It says it couldn't build 18 plates for us. That's okay. We just need enough to get this functional, and now stone can end up in here. We needed to get the assembler and the battery constructed before doing anything else. So what we want is the assembler. The assembler will give us access to large tubes, and even though we don't have large tubes, we don't actually need them quite yet. So we will grab some cargo containers still full. We have some steel plate. Take a bit of that, and what we're going to do is we'll just drop an assembler. The survival kit is the basic building block, and in it is the assemblers. So if we try to do it right now, scrolling up and down, we're not going to see we have anything because assemblers our large grid block. So by pressing our number 8 again, which is where our survival kit is located on our toolbar, we can change between large grid, small grid. Now that we are selected onto small grid, we can wheel around and see that we have full assemblers, industrial assemblers, and then this basic assembler. We're going to need this basic assembler first. If you want to be safe, you can shove it into the ground here, or you can just drop it at the moment. I'm going to shove it into the ground just so it doesn't move around. And what we want to do is we want to build this guy up just enough to get it functional and have the build progression on it. So I will make sure my build planner is clear, and we'll right click to add its components, and I can just go back and forth since I know we were building these already. And if you did not have the progression unlocked already, you will now. And there you go. We're not actually going to use this here. We just needed access to the hinges, pistons, and rotors. We needed access to those because what I want to do is put our assembler actually on our grid here. And to do that, I needed to unlock that basic assembler. So if I go back over here to my rotor selection, I should be able to put this advanced rotor. The advanced rotors will allow parts to move through them, whereas the standard rotors will not. I'll put this advanced rotor down. And what it's going to do is pop up this head for the small grid, but I want to convert to large grid. And I should not be able to build this yet. We'll see if I have parts for it, and it looks like I do. We can actually weld this up right now. Excellent. And now what we can do is stand directly above it. Actually might bounce a little much, so we can put a little bracing going around here with some blocks. What I want to do is force the head of the large grid rotor to sit in this area. I'm going to do that by selecting the large grid item, looking straight up, and having it come right down on top. See here, I'm being warned again that it's a temporary ship. All right. Let's go over to our rotors again. Pick number 6. I want to stand as directly above it as I can and as level as I can. And we look pretty decent there. Come up, and I want the advanced rotor part. And I want this to be on the large grid. So I want to make sure that I'm looking at the large grid component. We can see it's a fair bit bigger than the small grid. Looking straight up, I will place it and then get out of the way. And it should fall right into place there. Give it a moment to settle. And it looks like it's caught up on our blocking, which is kind of the purpose of it. I just wanted it to not fall the wrong direction. There we go. That's more or less what I want. I want it to sit right there. So now I'll get rid of the rest of these support blocks, and I'm doing that because the next part can cause a lot of issues with us. And that will be your first lesson in claying. You can see that that rotor is not quite lined up with the base. So we're coming over here, we'll go to our rotor, and we can tell it to attach. So it's close enough. And it just pulls itself into place there. You do want to lock this so it doesn't rotate around. Actually, I want you to set to go to 0, 0. And because we actually built the rotor, it should rotate into place. I just want this angle to not be whatever it is. So we can give it a little bit of braking torque because I never want it to move. And we'll give it a small velocity so it can rotate to where we want it to be. It doesn't seem to be causing it a problem, so I can advance. And it should stop at 0. Perfect. I can hold Control and left click in order to give these specific numeral values. Or I can hold Control and right click to reset back to 0 or default. I'm going to turn this lower limit to 0. So now it cannot move by the limits, and then I've locked it now. That's exactly what I want it to do. I do not want that moving around. But that should theoretically be piped to the rest of my system. It's still not quite helpful yet, but what I can do next is put an assembler, or rather a refinery on this. And that will allow me to continue to build. Let's go to our progression tree here. If we look up the refinery, it's also another basic block that we've unlocked here, and it will give us more items down the line. This refinery will actually allow us to get out of the Stone Age so that we can continue building and access the iron and the other materials that we have nearby. So we will do that now. And we'll select the refinery. And I cannot build this one yet because it has components that I cannot build yet. What we can build is this basic refinery. And I do want to sit it here. Let me get a better view. I know this port, this large port here, is what we need aligned, and that head of the rotor will have that large port. So I will set it there for now. And then what I can also do is put our basic assembler on top. So I know this has a straight through port going here, and this assembler only has one port, and I know it will be connected to the refinery there. So with these in place, I can get the components from here and here and here and weld up all of these items. We can come down here, advanced rotor head, boom. So there we can see I only have the plates in there. It has a couple of steel tubes because I just had those on hand, and now our refinery is up and running. So with the refinery up, at least, we can go into our production tab, and I will tell my survival kit not to be producing any more items, because, or ingots rather, because I do not need it to do so. What I do need is more stone for it. And if we go into our inventories, we can search for our refinery, and our basic refinery will actually refine all of this stone. It will not do it in little chunks like that survival kit was doing, and our refinery is a lot more efficient at this process too. It does use a lot more energy when doing so, which is a bit of a drawback. So we don't need to stay here in the Stone Age. What we can do is turn our drill off and get over to our iron, our nickel, our cobalt, because these are the materials that we will need next, as long as I don't flip over my rover. And I've done so. Well, that's completely predictable, because we're so top heavy and moving around is not such an easy thing. Well, I think that wraps it up for today's build. Until next time, go forth and build great things.